Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Unlock the Door Radio, where we make it our motto to question authority, just like Benjamin Franklin encouraged patriots to do. And might I say, even if you're not in the United States, and you don't really connect that much to Ben Franklin, it's a good idea anyway to question authority and see exactly, where things are coming from. Question the media, question government. Doesn't mean you have to become cynical, but at least be analytical. Anyway, on tonight's episode, I thought I would go over a little bit of this hysteria, or whatever you want to call it. I think it's media generated, but still, a lot of people are going to go see the movie 50 Shades of Grey. I'm not going to be one of them. But the thing is, I'm not going to sit here and criticize the film. I'm not going to praise the film. I don't know that much about it, except for the basics, which I'm going to make into more of a metaphor for contemporary American society. I'd argue also for much of the rest of the Western society that, like Europe, for instance. I don't think they're much different. But I'm just going to make a very basic metaphor here and try to see if there's kind of something we could learn from the premise of this very successful book series and apparently very successful movie. Now, the basics of 50 Shades of Grey is about a young woman who gets into a relationship with some really rich billionaire type guy, young billionaire. And it turns into a relationship of domination from him and submission from her. And it goes through this relationship as, I guess, he sets the rules and she follows and apparently must, find some sort of satisfaction in this sort of relationship. Now, this is where my connection to the book and the movie will end. Again, I don't care if you rate it, not, whatever. That's immaterial. I'm not going to make any judgments on the film or the books. But I'm going to say that when I first read what the books were about, it really reminded me of American society. Really, the relationship we have in the United States between, I guess we could just call them the middle class, working class people, and the 1%, or maybe what we could even call them, the 1% of the 1%, is very similar to one of domination and submission. Now, true, the upper classes aren't going around spanking people and that sort of thing in some sort of sensual manner, but really, take a look at where we are. We live in a society where pretty much, as Edward Bernays said, most of the values, most of the power in a society is exercised by people we don't hear about. We don't see them in the news. We don't see them in celebrity gossip and so forth. These are the people who select the people who run for Senate, run for Congress, and so forth. The people that have the money. And that's what really becomes important in today's society. And it is not just true for politics. It's true for, I think, every facet of American society. Maybe with the exception of religion. And in that one, I'm going to be cautious there. I'm going to say that many religions do have very wealthy people who ultimately control the directions of the particular religion, whether they be the donors to a particular congregation, in which the minister has to be like, well, maybe I'm not going to talk about divorce that much because the three principal donors to the church fund are all divorced individuals. But ultimately, religion gives a little bit of power to people that normally does not exist in contemporary American society. Now, of course, there's going to be some people Some people are going to say, well, now, wait a minute. We live in a democracy. We live in a system where if you really want to have an influence, you vote. You watch the news. You stay informed, and you make your voice heard on election day. Do you know what? Even then, you don't have that much influence. I mean, there was a study recently done, and I found it's kind of interesting. I saw it reported in a lot of the British press, but it's here in not so much in the American press. Although, I mean, there's big stuff out there about certain celebrities showing their rear ends, and everyone having a big deal about that, or what some wife of a football player is commenting about. I mean, those are big stories. I mean, we can't ignore that. And what's Miley doing recently? We got to keep up on that. But no, the British press, an article in the Telegraph recently, and basically what it is dealing with a study that was done by researchers from Princeton and Northwestern universities. And it says here in the headline, suggests that U.S. political system serves special interest organizations instead of voters. And here's just a quote from the first paragraph. The U.S. government does not represent the interests of the majority of the country's citizens, but is instead ruled by those of the rich and powerful, a new study from Princeton and Northwestern universities has concluded. The report, entitled Testing Theories of American Politics, Elites, Interest Groups, and Average Citizens, used extensive policy data collected from between the years of 1981 and 2002 to empirically determine the state of the U.S. political system. Look that up. Just type in Telegraph and the U.S. is an oligarchy study concludes. So anyway, really what this study and other research has indicated is that essentially if you've got power, then you can concentrate that power, whether it's, money ultimately, but various types of influence, onto elected representatives, and you will get what you want accomplished. Now, the polls may show some things. Now, I haven't even taken a stand on a lot of these issues here on radio, but I will say this. There are a lot of issues out in the United States public, such as, for instance, the issue with immigration across the southern border, how much there should be, and so forth. And what's kind of interesting is if you read the opinion polls, the vast majority of people have a much different view than people like Obama and Boehner and so forth. But where do you think it's going to ultimately wind up? You see, ultimately, what will happen is whatever the large interest groups and the large corporations want to have happen will happen. There are trade deals that are taking place both in regards to Asia and in regards to Europe. You probably haven't even heard of those. They're very major. There's a lot of things contained in those agreements, if they go through, that people might, both on the right and the left, might say, hey, wait a minute. This is not what we support. But once it's enacted, then it becomes the law. Once it's enacted, then it becomes something that goes through the courts and so forth. Personally, I think these kinds of things I think are going to wind up being just like when Boehner decided to ram through the budget deal that he supported, and then went about going after those who challenged his leadership and so forth. This seems to be where Washington is today. Now, again, it has always been that way. You read up on Lyndon Johnson, and when he got angry, he went after people. Richard Nixon, he did the same thing. But at least in those days, there was a sense that power was broken up a lot. We had a system where there were a certain number of checks and balances. In fact, in those days, we had a Democrat and Republican Party. I would venture to say today we have more of a Demopublican Party. There is, of course, the right to be able to express yourself. If you're a Republican, if you're more right-wing or left-wing, or a Democrat, if you're more right-wing. Well, maybe not if you're a Democrat right-wing. It might not be so good for you. But, various levels of left-wing. But the thing is, we really don't have that diversity that we had back in the Reagan days. I remember, coming of political age during Carter and Reagan. I was kind of precocious on that. And there were Republicans that were all over the place philosophically. There were Democrats that were all over the place philosophically. You had Democrats that were way more conservative than the most conservative Republicans, and vice versa. You had some Republicans that were really, really liberal. You don't have that now. Seems to be everyone's kind of, at least most of them, are kind of in the middle. When it comes to war, they're in the middle. When it comes to economics, they're in the middle. And you know where that middle stands? Right at the footsteps of the people who want the wars and want more money and regulations that benefit large corporations, but not so much what might benefit small guys that are setting up their own little, ma and pa diner someplace. Not part of a franchise. Who speaks for them? Come on, who really speaks for them? We know that the large, huge, like hamburger joints, those chains, they have some influence. They can afford lobbyists. Little diner out in the middle of a small town someplace in Wisconsin, they can't afford that. So they just kind of, they pin all their hopes on the local politicians and hoping that things go well when it comes to zoning and so forth. But they have nothing. They have no influence whatsoever, and I mean none whatsoever when it comes to, for instance, if there's a large plant that is going to shut down because a large retail giant is basically saying we want our stuff manufactured in China or Indonesia or Bangladesh. So in order to make more profits, in order to have a spreadsheet that's going to make those stocks go up and give more money to our shareholders and bring them more dividends, Wall Street has to look at this and think, wow, you are cutting costs and you're raising profits. So therefore, what do you think is going to happen? Well, the plant shuts down in Wisconsin and, the diner's affected. Might have to go out of business because now the people that used to go there during lunch, they're not going there for lunch anymore. And that's another really interesting point that we have to look at. Wall Street. Come on. When you hear about, the Dow is up, does that really help you? Now, if you've got some money in stocks, it might. But you know what? I think the Wall Street metaphor is very similar to something like the Super Bowl or something. Does it really matter to most people which team wins? Really? Maybe psychologically, the Dow is up. I hear Democrats, the Dow is up under Obama. Does that prove that more working class and middle class people, and maybe even people that don't have jobs, are getting better jobs or having more opportunities because of it? I don't think so, because just like what I just said a minute ago, if a company moves its operations in order to make the large retail firms happy, moves its operations, its manufacturing, to some country where you can pay people very little money and still get the same quality, or at least what passes for what consumers will go for, then it means the stocks will probably go up because the profits go up. If you're outside the country and there's issues with some worker getting hurt, well, these other countries have different rules than Wisconsin or Oregon or California might have. So, it's a win-win situation. Large corporations make more money. The stockholders make more money. They're happy. The Dow goes up, the 1% is happy, but the 1% of the 1%, they're ecstatic. It is a rapture for them. Now, does that translate out to any real feelings of good at your level? Probably not. But everyone seems to enjoy it. Americans are like, yay, bring it on, give us more. Oh, wait. Maybe not give us more choices when it comes to the people who determine things for us. For instance, let's take a look at the media. Let's take a look at the media. Back in the 1980s, there were lots of different corporations involved with media, whether it be newspapers, whether it was television. And cable was expanding it. It was like, wow, there's so many more choices out there. And it looked like things were going to get really, dare I say, more democratic because there's more choices. And obviously, to have true democratic values, you have to have lots of choices that you can actually choose from. Well, when they deregulated a lot of this back in the 80s and later in the 90s, okay, when this was done under both Republicans and Democrats, interesting thing happened. You had media deregulation, but also rules about that were set up to curtail monopolization were put aside. And so what happened was huge mergers taking place. Remember that scene? Do you remember that scene in Terminator 3 where the T-1000 gets melted in the steel plant? Hey, remember when America used to have lots of steel plants? Anyway, there was a steel plant, and he gets gets frozen first, then breaks up into little pieces, and then I guess because this robot's designed using nanotech, then everything melts, and then all the little droplets start clustering to each other, and then eventually they merge, and then the T-1000 is restored to his original frame and original meanness. Well, the thing is, this is pretty much how the media has been operating since the 1980s. You started out with a whole bunch of little guys, and then everything started merging and then being taken over by large conglomerates. Now, let's take a look at where we're at today. Now, I would suggest people if they want to, they can Google PBS, The Merchants of Cool, Media Giants. That's all you got to do. Go on Google and Google Media Giants, The Merchants of Cool, PBS. One of the best documentaries I think I've seen over there. And the thing is that in 2001, pretty much everything, media was controlled by News Corp, Viacom, Walt Disney, AOL, Time Warner, Sony, Vivendi, Universal, and Bertelsmann. Now, if you look at what they control, you just look underneath, and then you get the subcategories. And it could be one company controls film manufacturing, but also controls news and controls this and this and this. And I remember one thing from that documentary. One of the people interviewed was saying that we have more choices now, but less choice providers. And in that sense, do we really have more choice? It's like we're looking at reality shows. Everyone in America, talk about, going low when it comes to quality. But reality shows, they're all the same premise, it seems. And it's just, regular or whatever people, and they're fighting it out to attain something. But the thing is that the plots are very, very, very similar to each other. But we have lots of choice. I could choose. I could watch these housewives here, or people buying these dresses there, or I could watch these people making this food over here, or these people out on an island someplace, or hey, who's going to get naked this week? And they're going to have to blur out, any breast that might show up. I mean, this is where we're going. I mean, do you remember the what was it called? What was it? Idiocracy. Excellent movie. You should all watch it. Seriously. Started out as a comedy, and it looks like more like a documentary now. And there's this. I mean, it's kind of that same thing. The number one movie of their time. It's supposed to be set 500 years from now. Is a movie just it's a close up of a guy's rear end. And he moves it around, that sort of thing, and people sit there for a couple hours watching it. I mean, is this where we're heading, or is this where we're at now? But the thing is, people seem to enjoy this relationship. And who gives it? I mean, you get wealthy business people, media giants and so forth, come up with this stuff, and they aim for the lowest. Well, I'm actually not going to say the lowest. I'm just going to say the common denominator. What will bring in a lot of people from a certain demographic, and it could be any demographic really, and then you tailor your show to fit them, and you pick the same kind of cast people that will appeal to the demographic that you want to sell this to. You don't want them to look too outrageously successful, wonderful, gorgeous people, but you don't want them to be people that no one can relate to. I mean, there are reality shows for that too. I'm not going to give any publicity to them, but the thing is that this is what the billionaire class gives us. Through their people, they pay to come up with new shows and new entertainment. I mean, is that what it's all about? It seems to be. And people love it. People just love their relationship to that. I mean, I'll say this though. Now, people are going to say, well, what about the internet that provides a avenue to get information besides from these people? And that is true. That is true. Alternative media, very important. Very, very, very important nowadays. And it is having a certain amount of impact. But unfortunately, I saw a video recently that was an analysis of ISIS. It was really well done. I mean, this one really was an outstanding video. And I think it had like around, I can't remember. I don't think it had 50,000 views. Now, of course, if it did have 50,000 views, that's 50,000 people that are seeing something that they're not going to catch on networks in the United States, or for that matter, most networks in the Western world. But at least it's helping. But the thing is that's a small segment of people. I put a video. If you put a video of my cat got diarrhea and stick that on YouTube, all of a sudden you've got 2 million views and 100,000 subscribers. And that's pretty sad. Now, is it because people are dumb? I don't think so. I think ultimately this is where the society wants people. This is where American society wants people at. Silly videos, things that really don't matter to their lives. Oh, look, honey, there's a flood in East Burma that, and that sort of thing. And if you were asked that person who's like, hey, we got to see this, look at the flood. And ask, hey, where's East Burma? I don't know. Is it over by England someplace? I mean, it has no bearing. On the other hand, something like Ukraine and Russia, that has a bearing on people. Even though most people are really not very aware of what's going on. No, wait. We should back up. We're told that Putin is bad guy. We should not feel good about Putin because he's a bad guy. This is how our media spoon feeds us information. Do they analyze the situation? No. They show clips and give us their viewpoint. Oh, it's so outrageous how I have some people that I know who they believe they're really smart, and then they just spew forth whatever soundbite is in the media that week. And then when you ask them, "Oh, are you sure about that? Where did you hear that?" And they're kind of, well, everyone knows it. And I'm like, do they really? And then, of course, usually the person tries to change the subject. But the thing is, it's very difficult to get through to the large masses. Now, I'm not giving up. I'm saying alternative media. You know what you should do? Everyone here should at least forward, the videos and the news information that you get that you really like. If you sit there and go, yeah, I'm glad he or she is saying it that way, then spread the word. Because you know what? Most of the time, those people are doing it free of charge. They're not doing it out of any sort of profit motive. And even some that do it for a profit motive don't make a huge amount of money doing it. So spread it. I mean, it's like when you write a book. If you write a book and you have a small publishing firm that publishes your book, you're not going to really make any tremors out there in the book world. It's just not going to happen. Your books can be featured on Amazon and all these other places, but you're not usually going to get a lot of sales. Unless, of course, maybe, I don't know, you're important in your religion, you have this captive audience, and you can say, oh, you should buy my newest book on such and such. Or, you've got a big, alternative media firm or something, and you can make plugs there. The thing is, you're not going to make any tremors. Whereas if a book is taken by a large publishing house, for whatever reason, and it's going to get a lot of play. It's going to get reviews. It's going to get all of these other things because you've got people working to get it that way. The only way you can spread the word, if you read a book that you've picked up from a small publisher, and you want to make sure that, hey, I'd like to see more books like this. Well, the only way you're going to do that is actually to share that information on your Facebook or some other means, so that other people buy the books, so that other people wind up making a demand for that or books like it. Same's true for alternative media. You could say, wow, I ran across this video the other day. It was really fantastic. And then someone says, hey, can you share that with me? Oh, I don't think, I could look at my history. I don't know if I can find it, though. You should have shared it in the first place. Put it on Facebook. You're not going to, of course, if you put it on Facebook, it's not going to reach even a small fraction of your friends. If because of the way things are set up there, but it will reach a fraction versus none. So anyway, the other aspects of this whole relationship between the masses and the billionaires. Okay, now, well, let's take a look at the military-industrial surveillance complex. I mean, think about it. If you are over the age of 35 and someone would have told you back when you were, 20, that you would be living in a world in which your TV, some of the new TVs now, I was looking at some articles about that, actually, they even admit in the fine print, might want to talk about certain details around your TV set. Why? Because it's being monitored. I remember the first time I saw the movie 1984, and I was just like, how would that work where a television would be able to speak back to you? And I saw 1984 back in 1984. And now, I mean, the technology's there. I mean, you could be listening to that laptop that you might be sitting in front of right now, that little camera up there. Even when it's turned off, they can take pictures. Same with your cell phone. I've even heard, although I don't know if it's accurate, I haven't looked it up, that you can use someone's cell phone to track their heart rate. I mean, come on. We live in a world where you got to be really careful about the device you carry around. It's a leash. In a book that I'm going to send in for publishing here shortly, there's what it is it's dealing with sex trafficking and these sex traffickers. They put they put these bracelets, yes, bracelets, ankle bracelets on the women that they brought in. So they don't have to actually lock these women up that they bring in from Eastern Europe. They just put the bracelet on and they know where they're at all times. So therefore they can't run away. So yeah, there's no reason to, lock them in a dungeon when you can just, give them enough money to survive on. Of course, you're making a bundle off them, but then they can get their own apartments or whatever. But you're monitoring them 24/7. And that's kind of like what you do with your cell phone. I mean, unless you leave your cell phone, sitting down. And then that brings up weird questions like how in the world can you lose an airplane nowadays, even out in the middle of the Indian Ocean, when everyone has cell phones and the airplane had a GPS on it? I mean, I don't know. No one seems to ask that question. But, they've shown time and time again that you can be tracked with your cell phone. And people love it. They come out and say, hey, they admit it. The media even will sometimes come out and admit this. But it's for your convenience. Well, your convenience? Isn't that kind of like saying you're going to tie someone up and do kinky things to them? But it's for their good. They'll enjoy it. Well, I guess people seem to enjoy it, yeah. And they don't complain. If there was enough people that would actually say, I don't like these features, there'd be some company that would say, you know what, let's produce something that doesn't have those features. Notice that they're not doing that. It's kind of weird, isn't it? But anyway, the military-industrial surveillance state. Eisenhower, he warned us against it. He warned us and said, we should be always vigilant against too much power being concentrated in large corporations whose vested interest is the surveillance. Not surveillance. They didn't have that in those days. In the military-industrial complex. And what he was saying was basically this, and I think everyone has heard about this before. You get some liberal congressman, he or she hates the military, but yet they have a military base in their district. Lots of people stationed there, brings money in, helps, people that have their diners and stuff be able to continue in their businesses. So he or she votes 100% for those kinds of projects. Then they make deals with someone else that they'll vote for their project if they will vote for their project. And so everyone interlocks and you get these massive military budgets. And you know what? The U.S. military budget is bigger than all of the military budgets around the world combined. Wow. That is some force and power in a system in which we're borrowing money and our infrastructure is crumbling in order to make sure that when we decide we can throw some cruise missiles and those cost like $1 million a shot at someone we don't like. We didn't like Gaddafi. Look at Libya today. Christian Egyptians that have gone there to work, they get their heads cut off by ISIS. 21 of them yesterday got their heads cut off. Of course, ISIS films it. The thing is, I wonder, did the American taxpayer pay for the knives and the cameras by ISIS? Where did they get all their armament in a place like Libya? Wow, wasn't it just a few years ago that we were supposed to take out Gaddafi because we were worried that Gaddafi might be doing nasty things to some people that were against him? And what did we get for it? We blow a country. The BBC recently ran an article about the Christian men getting their heads cut off and said that, then they admitted, Libya cannot be called. Libya does not have a government. Libya is Mad Max. Okay, probably without the motorcycles. They have those white pickup trucks for ISIS. But if you wouldn't want to go to Libya, okay, I mean that is not the kind of place you want to go unless you're tired of life and you want to go out with a bang. But Libya doesn't exist. Where's NATO? NATO all that concerned? They were, oh my gosh, we've got to do something. You had England and France and the United States and of course when they all join hands and together, then they say, well, it's not our individual responsibility. So when people call out Obama supporters and say, why the heck did you support the war in Libya? They'll either say, well, it wasn't really a war. Well, what do you call it when you drop bombs on a country? If it's not a war, there's another word for when you bomb another country, including civilian targets. What is that word again? Oh, well, I'll let you think about that for a second. But you drop, they'll also say, well, it was NATO. Oh my gosh, who controls NATO? Let me see, Estonia? Do they control it? Norway, do they control NATO? Could it be France, England, and the United States are kind of the ones who really control NATO? I don't know. Maybe you put your money on Norway. I mean, those Norwegians, Viking heritage and all, they must control NATO. Obama had nothing. No. Sarkozy, Obama, Cameron, they had nothing at all to do with sending Libya back to the Stone Age. And putting ISIS in a position where they could start making huge inroads in countries like that. Okay, I mean, think about it. Think about where. But hey, we're not supposed to think about it, are we? You're supposed to watch little news segments, and then when you feel all anxious, then you buy the products that are advertised, because that will relieve the anxiety. It's totally Freudian. Bernays talked about it. Whip people up, show a commercial. I feel so much better. Whip them up again, show a commercial. Oh my gosh, I feel so much better now. Oh look, the weather report's on, and there's a tornado. Well, it's not in your state and everything, but hey, look what it did to that trailer park. This is how you're being played. Think about the Hunger Games, and then think about the way where things are today. And people enjoy it. They like taking the role of the submissive. Then we go on here. We've got the. I don't even want to deal with the sports thing. I am so a couple weeks ago, everyone was asking me like, "You going to watch the Super Bowl?" And I was like, "Why?" I got you know how much those guys are paid that play in the Super Bowl? They get a lot of money. But I mean, I don't know. I assume these guys are not playing for free. And then how are they making? Who makes the money ultimately? Oh, these huge media and other franchises and stuff, and all the products that are associated with it. And everyone gets worked up in a frenzy about it. Why? I mean, wouldn't it be better just to go out and go for a jog? and spend the day with the family or something? Why sit in front of this sports game? And the only thing I still haven't seen, I've heard people talk about it. I think the only thing that actually would be kind of interesting would be the halftime show or something, but I guess you could see that on the internet if you wish to. Now, another thing that I find interesting about this whole relationship between the masses and the money, you could say, is if you think about education nowadays, we want young people to succeed. And you know what? Back in the 1960s, you could tell a kid, if you want to go to college, you can make it happen. If you're smart, even if you're a poor kid, Okay, there are a lot of people back in college back in the 1970s and 80s who paid their way. They worked. They worked at a convenience store at night. They might take a job, as I did. I took a job on weekends working in a lumber mill. And yeah, that was before it got all sexy, with all these reality shows with people chopping trees down or cutting wood up. But the thing is, hard work, but I never had to take any loans in order to go to college. And the thing is that nowadays, people, they take loans and they get out of college and they owe a tremendous amount of money that if they don't get a job in their field of study, even if they did, unless they get a medical degree, or become really fantastic lawyers, it's going to be very difficult for them to pay that money back. And the interesting thing about this now is that a lot of young people actually, they hear about this. And so what does that do to their motivation? If they live in the ghetto or they live in Appalachia, they're living in a trailer court, and they might be really, really smart kids. They might be, future Einsteins or future Newtons or Freuds or any number of these kinds of famous people that shaped the world. But you know what? They see that they can get a 4-point average, and then it's a scramble for who can maybe get a grant or a scholarship. And so a lot of them, they just figure, what's the use? What's the use of even trying? Now, I'm not one of those people saying, oh, yeah, Obama, yay, 2 years of community college education or something like that. Because I wonder, well, what's behind that? And you don't hear about it too much anymore. It sounded like something that was just thrown out there. Everyone, got whipped up, and now it just kind of, you don't hear about it. But the thing is that the problem is that young people, they see what it's going to cost to get a college education. They see that jobs are not all that available. Because you know what? We just talked about it. Those billionaires that control U.S. society, they moved everything offshore, where you can make people work for nothing and make a huge profit. And that discourages them. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible to make it. People do make it. Okay? They find other things. They find a way. But we don't live in that period that we used to, that made it was really, if you just had a little bit of ambition, you could actually get, move a little bit up in social status. I've read that America has less social mobility now than, what was it? Was it England or Sweden or something back during the medieval days? I mean, come on. Have we gone back to feudalism? At least in feudalism, you only had to give 10% of your crops to the local lord. What's your tax rate now? It's a lot more than 10%. But the thing is that upward mobility is becoming increasingly difficult. And the problem, again, is people don't feel like they have ever anywhere to turn. They turn to the Republicans. Well, the Republicans give them the whole... essentially, a lot of people feel like they get the prison rape scenario. They turn to the Democrats. Different day, different soap. So what essentially is the alternative? Again, maybe people need to start... I'm seriously thinking we are long overdue for a return to kind of a 1960s mentality. I'm not saying, everyone now gets these images of hippies and stuff. But you know what? They had some good ideas in many respects. I mean, hey, and I don't use drugs or anything and so forth. But the thing is that the other aspects, the try to pull away from the consumerism. Try to pull away from the conformity. The ultimate way to show that you're not part of the system and part of the submissiveness. Oh, do it to me, that most people go through every single day, is to try to become independent in some ways. Try your darndest to teach yourself and your family. Try to avoid the contemporary low caste. I would say very low, very very low level of culture that is essentially symbolic of America today. Will you be, as Nietzsche said, if you try to resist the tribe, you'll be lonely. You'll feel discouraged. But you will own your own self. You will own your soul. Nietzsche was a smart guy. I wonder how many, you say Nietzsche to people on the street, they're like, is that a new rap group or a new pop star? Nietzsche? I think I heard her the other day on the radio. No, the thing is, we have to resist that. Resist the glitz. And speaking of it, it just dawned on me. I almost forgot. When it comes to your own health. I mean, if you take a look, I'm not going to take a stand on the whole vaccination thing, okay? But I can understand where people are saying they don't want to be intruded upon. Now, the thing I would say, though, is it's very difficult when you're talking to people on the street nowadays in America when you bring up the issue of food and all the corporations that, it used to be people could, when you bought a hamburger at a store, I mean, this is as late as the mid-1970s, that if you lived in a relatively, I'm not even going to say huge community, it might be a city the size of Eugene, Oregon, or Billings, Montana, or, not huge cities, but not towns either, that you could still go to places where you could buy locally, in stores, locally grown hamburger, locally grown grains, and so forth. In fact, I still remember going with my dad. We had some chickens. My dad was kind of, he wasn't a hippie. He just was kind of like, it's better to do things on your own. And the thing is that I still remember as a kid going and buying grain at a silo to be able to then, feed the chickens and other livestock. And the thing is that increasingly those kinds of options have diminished. Agribusiness has taken over. Multi-billion-dollar corporations right now are looking at Ukraine like, I don't know what, hungry piranhas, and you just threw in a bleeding cow into the river. I mean, those corporations are heading for Ukraine right now. They just want everything to stop in eastern Ukraine so they can feast upon that nation's resources and people. Now, the thing is that maybe try to find opportunities to buy your stuff organically grown. Try to find places where you can still buy food, like buy a side of beef from a farm directly, or chickens that actually haven't been fed all kinds of who knows what types of frankenfood and kept in little boxes so they don't move, so they grow fatter, and so I mean I have to admit, whenever I go to China, oh man, bacon is so good over there because there's hardly any fat on it. You know why? Because their pigs are not grown. Their pigs can turn around. That's not something you get in factory farms. Okay, pigs can move. Pigs have, they build muscle tissue. So when you do process them for meat, you're actually getting food that experience the outdoors in many cases. And you know what? I have to say, I wonder, does that mean it's going to be healthier and healthier to eat? It just seems to me that if you essentially, it's almost like the way we grow mushrooms. You grow them in these little confined areas in the dark, and then you look at the way factory farms are. It's no wonder the big corporations that own the factory farms go to state legislators and have a total fit and get laws passed to make it illegal to film inside of those factory farms. Because there's some animal rights people. They've gone in, they've gotten a job, and they have the little hidden camera, and they film the conditions. And instead of the legislators going, "Hey, wait a minute, that's kind of cruel," they go, "Oh, well, we better pass some laws to make sure that is illegal." No, not the mistreatment of animals, but the filming the animals, actually, and how things really are done. That's the way it is in America today. And I just think, can you save everyone? Is everyone going to have good health and have a clear mind and be able to process information and so forth? Probably not. Probably not. But should you give up? I mean, if suddenly you heard there's a zombie epidemic, would you just okay, well, might as well walk out there and let them have me? No, you'd fight it, and you'd try to save your neighbors, try to save your friends, certainly save your own family. Even though we're kind of told you shouldn't talk politics with your friends and family and people at church. In fact, nowadays, because you got a lot of church leaders who will say, "Don't talk politics at church now. Don't say that." I mean, wonder why that is. I think a lot of you listeners know why that is, don't you? But the thing is that it is a situation which you're going to want to give people some truth. So my suggestion would be, there's going to be a lot of people who love to be submissive. Tie me up and spank me. That's how they're going to feel about things. And they're going to enjoy it because they're looking at everyone else and saying, look how much they enjoy it. And it's just going to be part of a trendy thing. Yes, Oh, new handcuffs. Excellent. I was going to talk about police there, but I won't. Anyway, the thing is, dare to be yourself. Dare to help other people, because you know what? Think about it. At one time, you probably were part of the masses. Unless, of course, you grew up on some hippie commune in southern Oregon in which, you didn't have any sort of, hey, be a good consumer and be a good producer and be a good this and this and this and, everything for money and status and power. No. Probably most of you weren't. Most of you listening to this today are people that you could look back and say, hey, yeah, it was when this happened, or it was when this happened, or I became aware of this, that everything changed for me. And I decided to think for myself. And try and break the chains and be able to experience life. I turned out a video a while back, about Plato's allegory of the cave. And in that video, it was essentially saying that, it was talking about the idea that if our reality is based on what we see around us, if our reality is based on what we see around us, and we are unwilling to check and see what else exists, and then someone comes along and says, hey, there's a whole new world, a whole new way of thinking, most of us are going to feel uncomfortable. We're going to resist it, but come on, ultimately, at one point, you did. And it's important now that you try to get to this point where you don't just hold it in yourself, you spread. The thing is, take a look where the country is now. Take a look. We have military people, retired military people saying they never felt war with Russia would ever happen. During the Cold War, even when Reagan made jokes about, nuclear war, no one took it seriously. No one ever really thought about it. But you notice how the left was always like, oh my gosh, the world's going to end. And they were telling your kids, the ones that are now, I guess they would be kids that would be in their 30s right now, saying, oh, there's going to be a war and you're going to die, all of you. Why bother having a family when you're all going to die anyway, thanks to the Reagans, that sort of thing. Well, the thing is, we never had a nuclear war. But now we have a situation where we've never been closer. I so wish that Reagan were still alive today and be able to see what's happened. I think he'd be out there. He'd be one of these people, being interviewed on alternative radio and saying that this is not what I had in mind. This is dangerous. This is stupid. But people are going to follow along. They're going to salute and say, and like, yay, this is wonderful. My country's number one. Wave the flag around. And if anyone questions it, if anyone says, wait a minute, take a look at these facts over here, all of a sudden it's just like, oh, you don't love America. Well, isn't that kind of like an abusive relationship? An abuser pushes you around and forces you to do things, and then when you question him or her, they say, you don't love me, do you? You really don't love me. I don't understand why you don't love me. Don't you support what I am doing? It's for your own good. Isn't it the same thing to say that, to question where your government's taking you is in some way wrong? Teddy Roosevelt said that it is not an act of patriotism to support your government or your president, that you should support your nation, but you should question its leaders. Because if we throw that out, if we throw that aspect that was part of American culture, that sadly those men and women that grew up during the 1920s even, and 1930s, as they die off, they believed that essentially you supported your country, but you didn't unquestioningly support the large corporations and the large government. You didn't just say, yes, I will do as you say. And nowadays it's turned around. It's an act of patriotism. I love large corporations and I love the government. And in those cases where you do have left-wing, right-wing people, the right-wing person, they used to be, they could look and say, oh, there's corporate America, there's government. And they could say, government, I find you oppressive. I'm going to go over here to corporate America. The left-wing people, oh, corporations, I see you oppressive. I'm going to go over to the government. Well, you know what? Now they've merged. Government and corporations, same thing. So therefore, who do you go to? And then you got the right-wing, left-wing person looking at each other like, what happened? Yeah, really, what did happen? Anyway, we're running out of time here, so I'm just going to say, try not to be submissive. Try to assert yourself nowadays, and whether it be on the local level or even in your amongst your friends and family, try to stand up for what's right, and you'll bring more people around to your side. Don't be shy. Don't submit. Anyway, that's enough for this evening, and thank you for tuning in to Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV.
This is Ozzy Skateboard, and you're listening to UCY.